The sun was bright and the city streets were busy with people moving in and out of shops. On that Saturday afternoon, a young black girl named Amara walked with two of her close friends. She was only 14, but carried herself with a kind of quiet grace. Her friends laughed as they pointed to different window displays filled with shining shoes and handbags. For Amara, this was not just a normal walk. It was her first time entering the famous boutique everyone at her school had been talking about. The boutique was known for its high fashion, its glass doors, the perfume that floated in the air, and the sparkling chandeliers that made the whole place glow like a dream. Amara was excited, but she was also a little nervous. She came from a simple, grounded family, and her father always told her that respect was more important than money. She didn't come to buy anything. She just wanted to look, to imagine, and maybe to take a picture with her friends. Her friends held her hand and pulled her forward, encouraging her to step inside. The boutique doors opened and the air conditioning touched her skin with a soft coolness. The store looked magical to her. There were long glass counters filled with jewelry that shone like stars, and the racks of clothes looked like something from a magazine. Shoes were displayed on lit shelves, each pair looking too perfect to be worn. Amara's eyes grew wide and her friends whispered, "Wow, this place is beautiful." But not everyone in the store felt the same way. Behind the counter stood the boutique manager, a woman with sharp eyes and a tight smile. The moment Amara stepped in, the manager's smile faded. She stared, her eyes narrowing as if she had already judged Amara before she even touched a single thing. Amara didn't notice at first. She was too busy admiring a pair of white sneakers on display. They had a golden logo on the side, and she bent down slightly to read the tiny words printed there. Her heart raced not because she wanted to buy them, but because they looked like the sneakers her favorite singer once wore. Her friends giggled beside her, one of them pulling out her phone as if to snap a photo of Amara pretending to wear the shoes. At that very moment, the boutique manager walked over quickly, her heels clicking against the shiny floor. She didn't smile or greet them like customers. Instead, her voice was sharp and cold. "What are you doing here?" she asked. The entire store seemed to go quiet. A couple who had been looking at bags stopped and turned their heads. Amara looked up, confused, and softly said, "We're just looking." The manager's face hardened. She shook her head. "This is not a playground. Don't touch anything you can't afford." Her words felt like ice. Amara's friends froze and one whispered, "We're not doing anything wrong." But the manager ignored them. She stood directly in front of Amara, blocking her view of the sneakers, and said louder this time so others could hear, "I don't want to repeat myself. Put that down and leave." Amara's cheeks turned red. She wasn't holding anything, just looking. Her hands were by her sides. She tried to speak, her voice trembling. "I wasn't—" But before she could finish, the manager did something unthinkable. She raised her hand and slapped Amara across the face. The sound echoed through the boutique, a sharp crack that made even the perfume bottles on the shelves seem to tremble. Gasps filled the air. One woman covered her mouth with her hands. A man dropped the tie he had been examining. Even Amara's friends stood in shock, frozen like statues. Amara herself felt as if the ground had disappeared under her feet. Her cheek burned where the hand had struck, but more than the pain, it was the humiliation that sank deep into her heart. Her eyes filled with tears, not because of weakness, but because she couldn't believe a grown adult could treat her like that in front of so many people. Her friends rushed to her side. One of them held her arm and whispered, "Are you okay?" "Oh my God, are you okay?" The other friend turned angrily to the manager, her voice shaking. "You can't do that. She didn't do anything." But the manager stood tall, folding her arms, her chin lifted proudly. "I did what I had to do," she said coldly. "Girls like her think they can just walk in here and mess around. Not in my store." Those words sliced through Amara's heart. Girls like her. She knew exactly what that meant. She wasn't seen as a young girl with dreams. She was seen as someone who didn't belong. The crowd in the store murmured. Some looked at Amara with pity, while others simply turned away, uncomfortable with what they had just witnessed. Amara stood quietly, her hand slowly touching her cheek. She wanted to scream, to tell the world she had done nothing wrong, but the words stayed locked in her throat. She looked at her reflection in the glass counter. She saw a young girl who had only wanted to admire a pair of shoes, now reduced to tears by a stranger's cruelty. Her friends tugged at her, whispering, "Let's go. Please, let's go." She nodded softly, not trusting her voice. She picked up her small purse from the counter, her fingers trembling, and turned toward the door. The boutique felt like a cage, every step heavy with shame. As she walked out, the world seemed blurry, her eyes wet. The last thing she heard before the glass doors closed behind her was the manager's voice. Low but clear. People like that never belong here. Outside, the sun was still shining, but it felt colder to her now. Her friends hugged her tightly. One of them said angrily, "We should call the police." "She can't do that to you." The other whispered, "Text your dad. Tell him everything." Amara shook her head at first. She didn't want to bother her father. She didn't want to make a scene. She felt small, powerless, and deeply hurt. But as she stood there feeling the sting on her face and the sting in her heart, she realized she couldn't keep it inside. She pulled out her phone with shaky hands. Her fingers typed slowly. "Dad, something bad happened at the store. Can you come?" She didn't explain more. She didn't have the strength. She just pressed send and held the phone close to her chest. Her friend stood beside her, watching her with worried eyes. One of them wiped a tear from her cheek and said softly, "You're stronger than her. You didn't deserve this." Amara nodded weakly, but in her heart she wondered why kindness was so rare, and why people judged so quickly. She didn't know what would happen next, but she knew one thing. Her father would come, and when he did, everything would change. Amara stood outside the boutique with her two friends, her cheek still red from the manager's hand. The noise of the busy street around her felt far away, almost silent compared to the storm inside her heart. Cars passed, horns sounded, and people walked by, but Amara felt as though the world had stopped only for her. Her friends kept whispering words of comfort, but her mind replayed the moment again and again. The slap, the cruel words, the cold stare. She had done nothing wrong, yet she had been treated like she was less than human. She tried to smile at her friends, but the smile faded quickly. One of them, Lila, held her arm and said softly, "We should do something. You can't just let this go." The other friend, Maya, nodded fiercely. "Yes, we should go back inside, call the police, or call someone important." Amara shook her head gently. "I don't want to make it worse. I don't want everyone looking at me more than they already did." But even as she said those words, she could feel the tears welling up in her eyes. She didn't want to be seen as weak. She didn't want people to pity her. Yet the truth was, her heart was heavy and her hands still shook. She reached into her small purse and felt her phone. Her father's name flashed in her mind. Her father had always told her, "If anyone ever disrespects you, stand tall. You don't have to fight, but you must never stay silent." Those words gave her a bit of courage. She unlocked her phone and typed the short message she had already sent. "Dad, something bad happened at the store. Can you come?" She looked at the screen again, almost wanting to delete it, but it was too late. It was sent. She knew her father would see it, and she knew he would come. The three girls sat down on a bench near the store. Amara's friends kept an eye on the boutique doors, worried the manager might come out. Shoppers continued to go in and out, some glancing at Amara, recognizing her from the scene they had witnessed moments earlier. One older woman walked by and gave her a kind smile, whispering, "You're brave." Amara nodded softly, grateful for the small kindness. Minutes passed like hours. Amara felt the weight of every second, then her phone buzzed. It was a message from her father. "I'm on my way. Stay where you are." A strange mix of relief and nervousness filled her chest. Relief because her father would come. Nervousness because she didn't know what would happen next. Her friends sat closer to her. Maya leaned her head on Amara's shoulder. "It's going to be okay. He's coming. He's your dad. He won't let this slide." Lila added, "You know how everyone respects him. That manager is going to regret everything." Amara tried to smile. She loved her friends for standing by her side, for not leaving her in that difficult moment. But deep inside, she still battled feelings of shame. Why had the manager chosen her? Why had she been singled out when all she wanted was to admire a pair of shoes? The thought made her eyes fill with tears again, but she blinked them away. As they waited, more people began talking about what happened. Some had recorded the incident and were already sharing it on their phones. Amara noticed two teenagers sitting nearby whispering, "That's the girl who got slapped inside. I saw it on TikTok already." She quickly turned her face away, not wanting to be recognized even more. She never asked for attention. All she had wanted was a normal afternoon with her friends. Half an hour later, the air around the boutique suddenly seemed to shift. A tall, broad figure walked down the street and people began to notice. Heads turned, whispers spread quickly, and phones came out again. Amara's heart skipped a beat. It was her father. Shaquille O'Neal, the legendary basketball player, was not only famous for his size and strength but also for his presence. He didn't need to speak for people to notice him. At over 7 feet tall, he towered over everyone, and yet his walk carried calmness. He wasn't rushing, but every step was filled with purpose. Amara stood up, her friends standing beside her. When Shaq saw his daughter, he softened instantly. He bent down, his large hands gently holding her face as he looked at the red mark on her cheek. "Who did this?" he asked quietly, his voice deep but filled with concern. Amara's lips trembled as she whispered, "The manager." Inside, she thought I didn't belong. Shaq's jaw tightened. His eyes, normally kind and full of humor, turned serious. He straightened up, towering over everyone around him. People nearby began recording, whispering, "It's Shaq, he's here." The air was thick with anticipation. He took Amara's hand steady and firm, giving her comfort. Then he looked at her friends. "Thank you for staying with her," he said kindly. Both girls nodded quickly, almost in awe of him. Shaq turned toward the boutique. His steps were heavy, each one echoing with quiet authority. Amara followed beside him, still holding his hand, her friends close behind. Inside the boutique, the atmosphere was different from earlier. The manager stood near the counter, her arms crossed, still looking proud of her actions. She had no idea what was about to happen. Customers inside turned their heads as the doors opened and Shaq walked in with Amara. His tall frame made the store feel suddenly small. People gasped, whispering to one another. The manager blinked, then rolled her eyes slightly, not recognizing him. "Sir, can I help you?" she asked, her voice sharp. Shaq's deep voice filled the space. "Yes, you can explain to me why you laid hands on my daughter." Silence fell over the store. The shoppers froze, their eyes darting between Shaq and the manager. The manager's face twitched with surprise. She glanced at Amara, then back at him. "Your daughter? She was causing trouble. I had to stop her." Her voice shook slightly, though she tried to sound confident. Shaq leaned forward, his face calm but his words heavy with meaning. "She's 14. She wasn't stealing. She wasn't shouting. She was looking at shoes. And you put your hands on her." The manager swallowed hard, suddenly unsure of herself. She didn't realize the entire store was recording the exchange. Every customer had their phone out, capturing every word, every look, every second. Amara stood close to her father, feeling safer than she had all day. Her father's presence was not just about his size. It was about the dignity he carried, the way he spoke with calm authority, the way he reminded everyone in that store that respect was non-negotiable. The manager tried again, her voice breaking. I thought she was—" but she stopped. The words hung in the air unfinished. Everyone knew what she was going to say. She thought Amara didn't belong. She thought Amara was less. Shaq shook his head slowly, his deep voice quiet but firm. "You thought wrong, and now you'll answer for it." Amara looked up at her father, her heart swelling with pride. For the first time since that awful moment, she felt strong again. She wasn't alone. She never had been. The boutique grew tense as Shaquille O'Neal stood tall in the middle of the polished floor. His presence filled every corner of the room. The manager, who had been so confident just moments earlier, now looked uneasy. She didn't fully understand who he was, but the way the customers had pulled out their phones, the way whispers spread like fire, told her that this man was someone important. Shaq didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His calm but firm tone carried more power than shouting ever could. "This is my daughter," he said, his hand resting gently on Amara's shoulder. "She came in here to look at shoes and you put your hands on her." His words rolled across the boutique, heavy and sharp, leaving no space for excuses. Amara stood close to him, feeling the strength of his presence. The sting on her cheek still burned, but the warmth of her father's protective hand gave her courage. She glanced around the store and saw every eye fixed on them. Some people looked angry at the manager, some sympathetic toward her, but all were waiting to see what would happen next. The manager cleared her throat and tried to sound professional, though her voice shook. "Sir, she was..." She was touching the items without permission. I had to keep control of the store. Shaq's eyes didn't move away from her. His deep voice cut through her excuses. Control? By hitting a child? By humiliating her in front of strangers? That's not control. That's abuse of power. The room was so silent that even the soft hum of the boutique's air conditioner could be heard. Customers nodded in agreement, some even muttering under their breath. A woman in the back whispered loudly enough for others to hear. She didn't touch anything. I saw the whole thing. Another man added, I recorded it. This is going to go viral. The manager's face paled. For the first time she realized she might have made a mistake that would not only cost her a job but also her reputation. She stammered, I didn't mean... But Shaq interrupted gently, his voice steady. You meant every action. You meant every word when you told her she didn't belong here. You decided who was worthy and who was not. And now you must face the consequences. Amara looked up at her father, her heart racing. She had always admired him for his kindness, his humor, his larger-than-life personality. But in that moment she admired him for something greater. His strength to defend her without anger, to demand respect without losing control. The boutique door opened, and more people entered, curious about the scene unfolding inside. Some recognized Shaq immediately, their eyes wide with surprise. A few whispered, That's Shaq, he's here with his daughter. The buzz of recognition spread, adding even more pressure on the manager, who now seemed smaller in the presence of the towering man before her. Shaq turned toward one of the staff members standing near the counter. Call the owner, he said firmly. The young employee nodded quickly and rushed to the back. Within minutes, the boutique owner appeared, a man in a neatly pressed suit, beads of sweat forming on his forehead as he realized the situation. He looked from Shaq to the manager to Amara, piecing the story together as the murmurs of customers filled the air. What happened here? The owner asked nervously. Shaq didn't shout. He didn't need to repeat every detail. Your manager struck my daughter, he said simply. The words were powerful enough. The owner's face drained of color and he looked toward the manager with disbelief. Is this true? He asked sharply. The manager opened her mouth to defend herself, but the crowd of customers spoke before she could. It's true, one woman said. We all saw it. Another added, she even said the girl didn't belong here. Several people raised their phones, showing their recordings. The truth was undeniable. The owner turned back to Shaq, his voice trembling. Mr. O'Neill, I'm so sorry. This should never have happened. I'll take care of this immediately. Shaq's gaze didn't soften. An apology to me is not enough. You need to apologize to her. He gently guided Amara forward. She looked at the owner, her eyes still shining with the hurt she felt. The owner's voice broke as he said, I'm deeply sorry, young lady. You were treated unfairly. This is unacceptable. Amara nodded slightly, but the pain in her heart didn't vanish with his words. It wasn't about apologies. It was about dignity. The manager, now trembling, tried one last time. I didn't know she was your daughter, she whispered. The words made the entire room shift. Shaq's eyes narrowed and his voice grew even calmer, almost colder. So if she wasn't my daughter, it would have been okay? Respect is not about who someone's parent is. Respect is about humanity. You failed to see that. Gasps filled the store. Customers shook their heads, disgusted by the manager's words. Some even shouted, Fire her! Others clapped softly as if applauding Shaq for speaking the truth. Amara stood taller beside her father. For the first time since she had walked into the boutique, she felt seen. She wasn't invisible anymore. She wasn't just a girl who didn't belong. She was a young woman with worth, defended not just by her father, but by everyone who recognized the wrong that had been done to her. The manager lowered her head, unable to meet Shaq's eyes. The owner stepped forward, his voice stern. You're finished here. Pack your things and leave immediately. The manager's face flushed with shame as she realized her career had ended in front of a crowd of strangers, all with their phones capturing her downfall. Shaq didn't smile, didn't celebrate. He simply placed his arm around Amara's shoulders and said softly, Let's go. His calmness spoke louder than any victory. He had made his point. As they walked out of the boutique, people clapped quietly, some calling out, We're with you, Shaq. And stay strong, Amara. The girl lowered her head shyly, not used to attention, but deep inside a small spark of pride warmed her. She wasn't just the girl who had been slapped. She was the girl who had been defended, the girl who had shown strength by standing through humiliation, and the girl whose father reminded the world what respect truly meant. Outside, the sun was still bright. The crowd on the street had grown, some curious to see what had happened, others filming as Shaq and his daughter stepped into the light. Amara's friends rushed to her side, hugging her tightly, relieved it was over. Shaq gave them a nod of thanks, his expression softening now that they were away from the tension inside. Amara leaned against him, whispering, "Thank you, Dad." Shaq looked down at her with love. "You never need to thank me for protecting you. That's my job. But remember this, Amara. No one can decide where you belong. You carry your worth wherever you go." Her heart swelled at his words. In that moment, she realized the lesson was bigger than the slap, bigger than the boutique, bigger even than the viral videos now spreading across the internet. The lesson was about dignity, about never letting anyone's prejudice define who she was. And though she was only 14, she knew she would carry that lesson for the rest of her life. The boutique doors closed behind Shaquille O'Neal and his daughter, but the story was far from over. Inside, the manager's dismissal left the employees whispering, customers talking, and videos already flying across social media. Outside, the city street was buzzing, and people passing by kept stopping, pulling out their phones as they noticed the tall figure standing with his daughter. Amara clung gently to her father's arm. She wasn't embarrassed to be seen with him, she was proud, but she was still shaken. Her cheek still felt tender, and her heart still carried the sting of humiliation. Shaq looked down at her, his deep voice low and comforting. "Are you okay, baby girl?" he asked. She nodded slowly, though her eyes showed the truth. "I'm better now that you're here," she whispered. Shaq kissed the top of her head and held her close. Around them, a small crowd formed, curious and sympathetic. A woman approached carefully, holding her phone down at her side. "I just want to say I'm so sorry that happened," she told Amara. "You didn't deserve that." Amara smiled faintly, her voice too soft to reply, but her father spoke for her. "Thank you," Shaq said. "We appreciate that. News travels fast in the modern world, especially when cameras are everywhere." Within minutes, videos of the boutique incident were spreading online. Clips showed the manager raising her hand, Amara's shocked face, and Shaq walking in like a giant filled with quiet power. Comments began pouring in. People were outraged, angry that a young girl could be treated that way in such a public place. Support for Amara spread quickly, with hashtags and reposts making her story reach people she had never met. But Amara didn't care about the internet at that moment. She cared about the warmth of her father's arm around her shoulders, the steady sound of his voice, and the way he made her feel safe. Her friend stood close by, still in awe of what had just happened. "Your dad is amazing," Maya whispered. Lila nodded quickly. That manager had no idea who she was dealing with. Shaq overheard them and smiled slightly, but then he grew serious again. "This isn't about who I am," he said, looking at the girls. "This is about how she was treated. No one should ever be slapped or told they don't belong, whether their father is Shaq or not." His words sank into the girls' hearts, and even Amara, though young, understood the deeper meaning. Just then, the boutique owner rushed out of the store, his face red with shame. He jogged to catch up with Shaq and Amara. "Mr. O'Neal, please wait," he called. Shaq turned slowly, his eyes steady. The owner wrung his hands nervously. "I want to apologize again," he said, bowing slightly toward Amara. "I can't believe my manager behaved this way. She has been terminated immediately. Please, accept our deepest apologies." Shaq listened quietly, then asked in his calm, commanding voice, "Do you understand why this is so serious?" The owner nodded quickly. "Yes, sir, completely. It was not only unprofessional, it was cruel. We are embarrassed, and we will do everything to make it right." Amara looked at the owner, her young eyes filled with a wisdom far beyond her years. She didn't speak, but she studied him, wondering if he truly understood or if he was only apologizing because of who her father was. Shaq noticed her silence. He gently placed his hand on her back, then looked at the owner again. "I accept your apology, but my daughter is the one who was hurt. You owe her, not me. Make sure she knows you mean what you say." The owner nodded again, his voice softer as he turned to Amara. "Young lady, I am deeply sorry. You are welcome in our boutique anytime. You belong wherever you choose to be." His words were careful, chosen for the moment, but Amara only gave a small nod. She wasn't ready to forgive so easily. The owner looked as if he wanted to say more, but Shaq raised his hand slightly, signaling that the conversation was over. "Take care of your store," Shaq said firmly, "and make sure nothing like this ever happens to another child." With that, he turned and began walking down the street with Amara and her friends. People clapped quietly as they passed. Some shouted words of encouragement. "Stay strong. We're with you." Amara felt heat rise in her cheeks, not from shame this time, but from the unfamiliar experience of being the center of attention. She leaned against her father, whispering, "Everyone's looking at me." Shaq chuckled softly, his deep laugh like a warm blanket. "Let them look. Let them see you walk tall. You have nothing to hide." They reached Shaq's car parked nearby, a large vehicle that seemed fitting for a man of his size. He opened the door for Amara, letting her and her friends climb inside before he settled behind the wheel. As the car pulled away, Amara gazed out the window. The boutique grew smaller in the distance, but the memory of what had happened inside still lingered in her mind. Shaq noticed her silence. "What's on your mind, baby girl?" he asked gently. Amara took a deep breath. "Why did she do it, Dad? Why did she think I didn't belong?" Her voice cracked slightly and her eyes filled with tears. Shaq's heart ached at her question. He slowed the car and glanced at her. "Because some people judge before they know the truth. They look at the color of your skin, your clothes, your age, and they think they know who you are. But they don't, and they never will, unless they open their hearts." Amara listened carefully, nodding slowly. "It hurt so much," she admitted. Shaq reached over and squeezed her hand gently. "I know it did. And it hurts me too, more than you can imagine. But I want you to remember something. Her actions don't define you. You're worth more than her ignorance. Don't ever let someone's opinion make you feel small." Amara's eyes softened as she absorbed his words. She leaned her head on his arm, comforted by his strength. Her friends, sitting in the back, whispered to each other, clearly moved by what they had just witnessed. Meanwhile, the world outside the car was reacting in real time. News outlets were already picking up the story. Headlines appeared. Boutique manager slaps young girl. Father is NBA legend Shaquille O'Neal. Videos of the incident reached thousands of views within hours. Comment sections filled with outrage, sympathy, and calls for justice. Shaq's phone buzzed nonstop with calls and messages, but he ignored them for now. His priority was his daughter. He drove them to a quiet park nearby, a place where he often took his children to clear their minds. They walked along the path, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows. Amara held her father's hand tightly, her friends trailing behind. At one point, Shaq stopped near a bench and sat down, pulling Amara beside him. "You know," he began softly, "when I was your age, I faced things like this too. People looked at me and decided I didn't belong, but I learned to stand tall no matter what. That's what I want for you. Stand tall, Amara. Don't let anyone take away your light." Amara wiped her tears and gave him a small smile. "I'll try, Dad." He smiled back, his huge hand gently brushing her hair from her face. "Not try, you will." "Because you're stronger than you think." The evening grew calmer, but the lesson of the day stayed deep in her heart. The humiliation hurt, but the dignity she found in her father's defense and the lesson he gave her meant even more. She realized this was bigger than her. It was about every child who had ever been told they didn't belong, every young person who had been judged unfairly. And though she was only 14, Amara knew this moment would shape her forever. The night after the boutique incident, Amara sat quietly in her room. The lights were dim, and her favorite books were stacked neatly on her desk. She held a small mirror in her hand and looked at her cheek. The redness was almost gone, but the memory of what happened felt as fresh as ever. She touched the spot gently and sighed. She was not just thinking about the slap. She was thinking about the way she was looked at, the words that cut her deeper than the sting of a hand. Her phone buzzed again and again. Messages from friends, classmates, even strangers were pouring in. Many people had already seen the video online. Some sent her words of support. "You're so brave. Stay strong. Amara." Others expressed anger at the manager. What she did was wrong and cruel. Amara read them slowly, feeling both comforted and overwhelmed. She wasn't used to this kind of attention. She had always been just a quiet girl at school, not someone the world talked about. Downstairs, Shaq was on the phone with reporters and lawyers. His deep voice carried through the house, calm but firm. He wasn't chasing fame. He was protecting his daughter. He wanted to make sure the boutique learned its lesson, and that no child, his or anyone else's, would ever face such treatment again. Later that evening, he came up to Amara's room. His large frame nearly filled the doorway, but his expression was gentle. "How are you holding up?" he asked softly. Amara put down the mirror and shrugged. "I don't know," she admitted. "It feels like everyone knows about me now." "I don't like it." Shaq walked in and sat on the edge of her bed. "I understand. But remember, you didn't ask for this. It came to you because someone did something wrong. And now people are standing with you because they see the truth." Amara looked down at her hands. "Dad, do you think people will always look at me differently now?" "Not because of me, but because of what happened." Shaq leaned closer, placing a hand over hers. "People may talk for a while. But what matters most is how you see yourself. You're still the same Amara, smart, kind, full of dreams. Don't let this moment change who you are. Let it make you stronger." The next morning, the story was on every news channel. TV anchors repeated the headline, "Boutique Manager Fired After Incident with Shaquille O'Neal's Daughter." Social media platforms were flooded with clips of Shaq defending Amara, his calm words echoing, "Respect is about humanity." People admired how he handled the situation without anger, showing strength through dignity. At school, Amara was nervous. She didn't know what her classmates would say. As she walked through the hallway, heads turned and whispers followed. But instead of mockery, she heard support. "We saw the video," one classmate said. "That was awful, but you were so strong." Another added, "Your dad is amazing. He stood up for you like a hero." Amara smiled shyly, still uncomfortable with the attention, but she felt lighter knowing people understood her pain and respected her courage. Meanwhile, the boutique itself was in crisis. Customers threatened to boycott, and videos of the incident had millions of views. The company issued a public apology, admitting their mistake and promising to train all employees in respect and fair treatment. The former manager disappeared from the spotlight, her actions condemned by thousands of voices. But for Shaq and Amara, it wasn't about destroying a boutique or a single person's career. It was about teaching a lesson the world needed to hear. Dignity matters, no matter who you are, no matter where you come from. One evening, a week after the incident, Shaq took Amara out for dinner at her favorite restaurant. The place was cozy, filled with warm lights and the smell of fresh bread. As they sat at their table, people glanced over, some recognizing Shaq, others recognizing Amara from the news. A few even came up politely to say, "We're proud of you," or "Stay strong." Amara blushed, but her father thanked them with his usual kindness. As they ate, Amara finally asked the question that had been on her heart. "Dad, will this ever go away? Or will people always remember me as the girl who got slapped?" Shaq put down his fork and looked at her seriously. "Baby girl, people don't just remember the bad. They remember how you rise after the bad. You will not be remembered as the girl who got slapped. You will be remembered as the girl who stood tall, who didn't let anyone take away her dignity, and who had a father that reminded the world what respect means." Amara's eyes softened and a small smile spread across her face. "You really think so?" "I don't just think so," Shaq said, his deep voice steady. "I know so." In the weeks that followed, the noise of the internet slowly faded. Other stories came and went, but Amara's life began to return to normal. Yet something inside her had changed. She walked a little taller, spoke with a little more confidence, and carried a quiet strength that others noticed. Her friends told her, "You've become braver," and even her teachers praised her for handling such a difficult moment with grace. Shaq continued to remind her of her worth. Sometimes while driving her to school, he would say, "Remember, no one defines you but you." Other times, while sitting at home, he would look at her and smile proudly, saying, "You're stronger than even you know." The boutique incident, painful as it had been, became a turning point. It was no longer just a story of humiliation. It was a story of courage, family, and the power of standing up for what is right. Years later, Amara would look back on that day not with shame, but with pride. She would remember how her father walked into that boutique, not with fists or anger, but with words and dignity that shook the entire room. She would remember the lesson that respect isn't something people give because of fame, but because of humanity. And she would carry that lesson into every part of her life, teaching it to others just as her father had taught her. For Shaquille O'Neal, it was never about headlines or going viral. It was about his daughter, about love, and about making sure she knew she was never alone. And for Amara, it was about discovering her own strength in the face of cruelty and realizing that her father's arms weren't just a shield. They were a reminder of her own power to stand tall. On a quiet evening long after the noise had faded, Amara sat with her father on the porch of their home. The sky was painted with colors of the setting sun. She leaned against him and he wrapped his arm around her shoulder. "Dad," she said softly, "thank you for everything." Shaq smiled down at her, his voice gentle. "Always, baby girl, always." And in that peaceful moment, Amara knew the truth. No matter where life took her, no matter what challenges came her way, she would carry with her the strength of that day, the lesson of dignity, and the unshakable love of a father who showed the world what it means to truly stand up for someone you love.